The string quartet played something soft and romantic, but my heart thundered beneath my lace bodice. My wedding dress felt weightless, my fingers trembling as they clutched Ethan's hand. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And it was, almost. The ballroom was everything I had dreamed of, white orchids spilling from the chandeliers, flickering candlelight dancing in every wine glass, and the scent of vanilla and roses weaving through the crowd like a delicate promise. We were surrounded by love, or at least the illusion of it, except for her. From the corner of my eye, I could feel her presence, like cold air seeping through a closed window. Margaret, my mother-in-law, stood still as a portrait near the champagne tower, her lips pressed in a tight line that didn't even try to form a smile. Her dress was blood, red silk, an odd choice for a wedding, and somehow I knew it wasn't accidental. Nothing Margaret did ever was. She had smiled during the ceremony, clapped politely, even posed for photos, but it never reached her eyes, and today, of all days, I saw it most clearly, behind the pearls and posture, behind the thin veil of upper-class civility. She despised me. I wasn't the girl she wanted for her son. Ethan was everything to her, her golden boy, her only child, the man she molded to be perfect. A perfect man now tethered to a woman she thought unworthy. Me, I'd tried. God, I had tried. Brunches, spa days, polite laughter at her outdated jokes. I had listened, nodded, smiled. She met every effort with subtle sabotage, backhanded compliments, shading my choices, telling Ethan I was too emotional, too ambitious, or not quite his type. Ethan never seemed to notice. Or maybe he chose not to, but today I saw something in her gaze that went beyond resentment. It was something colder, something calculating. I watched as she moved toward me, glass in hand, her heels silent on the marble floor. She smiled, too sweet, too sudden. Darling, she purred, her voice low enough for only me to hear. May I steal the bride for just a moment? I hesitated. The photographer was still snapping pictures, but Ethan was now laughing with his groomsmen, his eyes turned elsewhere. Of course, I said, careful to keep my voice steady. Margaret led me to a quiet corner by the balcony, just out of earshot from the crowd. A toast, she said, handing me a glass of champagne she had poured herself. She held her own in her left hand, perfectly manicured fingers tapping the crystal. Just us, a private welcome to the family. My fingers reached out automatically, conditioned by years of etiquette. But then I saw it, a flick of her wrist, too fast for most to notice, but not me. Something had glinted in her right hand before disappearing back into the tiny silver clutch she carried. My stomach knotted. Margaret's face was a mask of serenity, but her eyes flicked down for a split second to the glass I held. I smiled, of course. I said lightly. Then, as I lifted my glass, I stumbled deliberately, catching myself on a nearby chair. Oops, sorry, long dress, I said with a soft laugh. Margaret blinked. In that second, I switched our glasses, my movements practiced and subtle. Years of waitressing in college taught me more than she would ever guess. She didn't notice. We clinked glasses. To new beginnings, she said, her voice like velvet over steel. I watched her sip. I only pretended to drink. The rest of the night blurred into shimmering lights and smiling faces, but I kept glancing over at Margaret. At first, she was fine talking to guests, fluttering about with her usual icy grace, but 20 minutes later, I saw her grip a chair for balance. Her posture slumped. Her pupils looked slightly dilated. Her glass sat abandoned on the table. Someone laughed too loudly beside her, and she flinched. "Are you okay, Mother?" Ethan asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. She blinked slowly as if waking up from a dream. "Oh, yes, just dizzy, probably too much champagne," she mumbled, dabbing her forehead with a napkin. Ethan turned to me with concern. I mirrored his worry with a furrowed brow, hiding the storm rising inside me. Margaret wasn't drunk, not that quickly, not from one glass, and she certainly hadn't meant to drink that one. My hands were cold, my heart beat louder than the string quartet, now playing Vivaldi in the background. She had tried to drug me at my own wedding. It hadn't been a hallucination or nerves. I had seen the vial. I had seen the switch, and I had tasted nothing but bubbles. She never suspected a thing. Later that night, when the guests had gone and Ethan carried me across the threshold of our hotel suite, I couldn't stop thinking about the moment. The flick of her wrist, the way her eyes had widened just a fraction before she sipped. She had planned something. What exactly to humiliate me, have me pass out during our first dance, or maybe during the toast, slurring words in front of his family, her friends, the society columnists? Or was it worse? Ethan brushed a strand of hair from my face. "You okay, love? You're quiet." I smiled at him and kissed his hand. "I'm perfect." I lied, but my mind raced, because if this was how our life was starting, what would she do next? I couldn't sleep the night of our wedding. Ethan slept beside me, one arm draped around my waist, the soft rhythm of his breathing in sync with the waves crashing beyond the balcony. He looked peaceful, happy, innocent. I stared at the ceiling. The image replayed in my mind like a broken record. Margaret's elegant fingers, the glint of silver, the practiced smile, the sip. What had she expected to happen? Did she think I'd collapse at the table, ruining my own reception? That I'd slur my speech, embarrass Ethan in front of the whole family? Or maybe something worse, a fall down the staircase, a paramedic's siren cutting through the music? No, it wasn't just humiliation she wanted. It was annihilation of my image, my dignity, my place. And the worst part, she would have stood there stone-faced, acting shocked and concerned, whispering to Ethan that maybe I wasn't well, that marrying me had been a mistake. She wasn't just cruel, she was dangerous. The next morning, while Ethan showered, I opened my handbag and pulled out the champagne glass I'd hidden in a napkin. I had snuck it out during the cleanup while everyone fussed over Margaret's champagne headache. I wrapped it carefully in a silk scarf and placed it in a secure box. I wasn't going to accuse her without proof. I knew better than to give her any more ammunition. I needed evidence, clean, hard, undeniable. 2 days later, I met Leah, my college roommate and close friend, for coffee. She worked in a research lab, and we'd stayed close over the years. I handed her the box. "What is this?" she asked, laughing. "Please don't tell me you've started collecting wedding souvenirs. It's kind of a joke. I just want to know what was in the glass." She tilted her head, like chemically, "Yeah, humor me." She hesitated but finally took it. "Sure, I can run a basic talk screen." My smile didn't reach my eyes. "Thanks, Leah." The results came back 3 days later. Leah met me in a quiet little bookstore cafe, the kind of place we used to haunt during finals week. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table, her face serious. It tested positive for lorazepam, a benzodiazepine, high concentration. I blinked. "That's a sedative, right?" "Yeah, it hits fast, causes drowsiness, dizziness, confusion. In some people, especially on an empty stomach or mixed with alcohol, it can knock you out cold, not deadly but enough." I swallowed hard. Enough to ruin a wedding. She looked at me sharply. "Ava, who gave you this glass?" I hesitated. "Let's just say I dodged a bullet." Leah's voice lowered. "This isn't a prank. Someone slipped this in your drink. You need to tell the police." I shook my head. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because the law can punish someone, yes, but it doesn't teach them fear. It doesn't make them watch their back. And it doesn't give you the pleasure of a slow, calculated revenge." At home, I tucked the test results in a red leather folder and placed it behind a row of cookbooks in our kitchen. I didn't tell Ethan, not yet. He loved his mother, even if he couldn't see what she was, or maybe he refused to see. I wasn't about to make this a war between us. I needed him to open his eyes on his own, so I waited. And I watched. In the following weeks, Margaret continued her act, the perfect mother-in-law. She sent us a new coffee machine, invited us to her lake house, made veiled comments about babies and timelines. Each time we met, I noticed the way her eyes searched mine. She was looking for signs of weakness, confusion, paranoia. She must have wondered if I remembered anything from the reception. I gave her nothing. I laughed. I thanked her for the flowers. I complimented her cooking. I made her question herself. Then came the second strike. It was a family brunch at her estate, and Margaret had prepared the seating chart herself. When we arrived, I saw the place cards. Ethan seated between his cousins. I was placed at the opposite end of the table, isolated next to two elderly relatives who didn't remember my name. Margaret raised a toast. "To love that lasts," she said, glancing down the table with a small smile. Ethan noticed the seating immediately. "Why are you all the way over there?" he asked me, concerned. I shrugged. "Your mother probably thought I'd want to make new friends." I watched Margaret's jaw tighten just slightly. She had expected me to complain, maybe even cry. Instead, I smiled, charmed everyone around me, and made a toast so elegant, even she couldn't interrupt. When we left, Ethan said, "You were incredible today." "She makes it hard." I replied softly. He paused. "She's difficult, but she loves me. She doesn't have to love me." I said, "But she should respect what you love." He kissed my forehead. Another seed, quietly planted. I started inviting her to small events, cooking classes, wine tastings, and always included someone from her circle, someone she respected. I was building my army in plain sight. Her friends adored me. Her sister called me a breath of fresh air. Even her cold, calculating husband, who barely spoke at gatherings, once told Ethan, "You chose well." And slowly, Margaret's smug confidence started to crack. She started to slip. Passive-aggressive comments turned sharper. She criticized my outfits, my schedule. Once, she even suggested I was pressuring Ethan into marriage. We'd been married for 2 months. That night, Ethan asked me, "Do you think my mother doesn't like you?" I blinked. "Do you?" He didn't answer. But I saw the gears turning, and that's all I needed. I knew Margaret was used to being in control. But I wasn't the sweet little bride she thought I was. I was patient, and I knew her secret. Margaret was unraveling. And I could see it not in any grand display, but in the small, tightly controlled cracks she tried to cover with pearls and forced smiles. She had underestimated me. She thought she'd married her son to a fragile little girl who would crumble at the first sign of disapproval. A woman who would bow, apologize, try harder to earn her affection. What she didn't expect was that I wouldn't fight her with screaming or scandals. I fought her with silence, with grace, with strategy. A month after the brunch seating stunt, Ethan told me something that made my blood hum. My mom asked if we'd ever considered couples counseling. I blinked. What? She said it's just good practice, that it would help us prepare for what's ahead. We hadn't argued. Not once. She was planting seeds, trying to create cracks where there were none, she also said. Ethan added with a bitter laugh that maybe we got married too fast, that you were trying to trap me before I figured things out. There it was. The mask was slipping. "What did you say?" I asked gently. He hesitated. I told her she was out of line. And there it was again, another step. My silence was paying off. I planned the confrontation with care. It had to be personal, private, and unmistakable. So I invited her to tea, just the two of us. I made sure Ethan was out of town, a conveniently timed conference. And I served everything just the way she liked it, loose, leaf Earl Grey in real porcelain, fresh lemon slices, lavender shortbread cookies I'd baked that morning. I greeted her with a warm smile. She was cautious, lips pressed tight. "What's the occasion?" she asked. "No occasion," I said sweetly, "just wanted a little one on. One time with my favorite mother-in-law, she didn't touch the tea." Smart, I sat across from her, folding my hands neatly in my lap. Then I slid the red leather folder across the table. She stared at it, then slowly opened it. Inside, the toxicology report, Leah's findings, the lab's name. The notes circled in red. Her face went paper white. Her voice broke for a second. You tested it. I tilted my head slightly. Of course I did. I didn't. Don't lie to me, Margaret. I said softly, not today. She closed the folder with shaking hands. You don't understand, I thought. I thought maybe if you just collapsed, slurred your words, passed out in front of his friends. What was the goal exactly? She didn't speak. You thought I'd embarrass myself. You thought Ethan would second. Guess everything. You wanted to ruin my wedding without getting your hands dirty. I was protecting him, she said bitterly. From you, no, I said, my voice as still as water. You were protecting yourself from losing control. Her eyes flickered. I leaned forward slightly, and you did lose it. The second we said I do, he wasn't yours anymore, and you couldn't stand that. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off with a smile. I'm not here to fight or report you or tell Ethan, not yet at least. Then what do you want? I sipped my tea. I want you to understand how close you came to destroying your own son's life. Her jaw tightened. Because if I had drunk what you gave me, Ethan would have seen you for exactly what you are. Maybe not right away, but eventually, and he would have hated you for it. She was silent. I stood up and placed the empty teacup in the sink. You think you're powerful because you know how to manipulate a room. But your power doesn't scare me, Margaret, because I've already beaten you. Her head snapped up. I married your son. He loves me. He trusts me. And now, every time you try to come between us, I won't raise my voice. I won't accuse. I'll just keep being the woman he wakes up next to, the woman he fights for. I walked toward her slowly, and the more I love him, the more he'll see who really doesn't. She stood, furious now, but still cornered. I won't let you destroy my family, she hissed. I leaned in. You already tried, and you failed. When she left the tea untouched, she didn't say goodbye. I watched her red car disappear down the driveway and close the door gently behind me. Then I turned and smiled. Because I didn't need to make a scene. I didn't need to expose her. I just needed her to know that I saw her clearly now, and that I was no longer afraid. Since then, Margaret has played her part well. In public, she's the picture of motherly grace. But her smile tightens whenever she looks at me. She sends smaller gifts now, no more dinner invitations, no more brunches or friendly advice. We exist in a quiet war of glances and silence, and I'm winning because she knows what I know, and she knows that I'm waiting. Ethan and I built our life carefully, deliberately. We bought a small house just outside the city. We cooked together. Laugh often. I never told him the full truth, not because he wouldn't believe me, but because I didn't need him to fight my battles. I already won. Margaret may still cling to her delusions, but deep down, she knows she made a fatal error, not the poison itself, but choosing to aim it at someone who knew how to play the long game. Someone who smiled when she should have screamed, who clinked glasses and whispered cheers, even as she watched the queen lose the board.